Welcome back to a second part of the show. Like I told you, we'll be focusing on the coffee sector reforms that have been happening in the country. And my colleague joins me now, Peter Okapa. Indeed, a lot happening in the coffee industry.
Yep.
Plus, of course, there's a big conversation coming up after that.
Oh, yes, Abby. In fact, a quick question just before you go. Do you know how to tell a good coffee from a really, really good one?
I cannot answer that for now because it will come after the interview.
Maybe after we are done with Kavinya, maybe you just might be able to tell us what exactly that difference is. Indeed, Kavinya, maybe in 30 seconds, what exactly differentiates a Kenyan coffee from just any other cup of coffee out there?
I mean, first and foremost, you have to remember Kenya produces one of the best beans in the world, hands down. And that starts with the variety that we have in the farms, SL28, SL34. The moment you mention that, internationally, everybody's like, yes, that's a Kenyan coffee. So what makes it really special and distinct from what you find in a Colombian or Brazilian or even an Ethiopian are the nuanced flavors, the notes. A Kenyan comes with the tomato flavor, blackcurrant flavor, and we call them stone fruit, but there's a citrus element of a Kenyan coffee that you don't get anywhere else.
Well, indeed, quite a nuanced reply there, and it needs something that we'll be getting to, Abby, as we go over the next, well, maybe 20 or so minutes. Many of our viewers, including yourself, should be able to tell exactly what makes a Kenyan coffee special.
Fantastic. Take it away.
Well, indeed, let's kick off this segment now. We have a significant focus on coffee in this segment, as indicated there. Now, for 2 years now, the coffee sector has been deep in the throes of the expected change after the president put in place a task force to examine the challenges facing the coffee sector. After the task force submitted its report, the president once again appointed a committee charged with implementing the reforms that were set out in that report. Now, Professor Joseph Kia is the man at the helm of that committee. He sat down with me for a discussion on the progress made so far. This is that discussion.
I was appointed by the president in 2016 as a task force to actually do a rigorous value chain analysis on the reason why coffee's production has gone too low. What we found of the report was about 8 recommendations we made, and within these 8 pillars, that's why my mandate is coming as a committee, because after the task force, the president appointed again to chair the implementation committee. We experienced some problems with some challenges earlier on. There are 2 cases that were brought against us by the Council of Governors, and also some other organization in Nyeri. And basically what these 2 challenges were bringing up was there was no proper consultation when we came up with the recommendations. So that has delayed, to some extent. We have gone back. The court ruled that that we have to go back and do proper consultation, again in line with the Constitution, which has been a series, consultation meeting that we have been having, and we are almost done. We have consulted with the Council of Governors. We agreed sometimes in January that the direction we're taking, that they're happy with it. We have also met with the unions. We have also met with individual farmers, from the 31, coffee growing counties. We also have a meeting with the Member of Parliament from the 31 growing country, again with all the idea of make sure that this consultative issue has been taken into account. Obviously, there's some contentious issues that are coming up, which we will try to address.
For me, the most outstanding thing about agriculture in Kenya is the fact that the average age of a Kenyan farmer is north of 60 years. The fact that this aspect remains unsustainable for not just the coffee sector, but for the rest of the agriculture sector. What do you think we need to do in terms of bringing in technology and indeed bringing in the youth into this sector so that we can start to build towards the future?
I think, again, I said we have about 8 pillars.
Yes.
And one of the pillars is to increase, domestic consumption, and as well as, again, addressing that issue of intergenerational link between the old farmers and the young. And what we had recommended is that we advised the government that we should come up with a few programs to try to find a way that the youth can be able to engage within the value chain. And mostly don't, and I'm sure you know that the coffee value chain is very long. There are areas that the young people can become farmers. They can also play at a very high level of, the value additions. So there is a quite range of areas of a strategic point of entry that the young farmers can, the youth can be part of it. Obviously, we proposed a few specific programs. One of them was we create like a business school within either Utalii College or the Coffee Research Institute. Again, with a way of training, young Kenyans to become cuppers, bars, and all other value chain activity that they can get involved in.
The fact that there are Kenyans out there who have been able to penetrate the market that we are talking about, and the fact that there are lessons for the local industry, there are lessons that as a committee you can borrow from them in terms of holding your hand to be able to get into those markets. Do you think there are opportunities for partnerships? For the last 2 years, which have been done a lot of traveling, I've seen young Kenyans who have really been very creative and doing very good job, both locally and internationally. And I'm hoping my committee can be engaged with those kind of a group to be able to advise us on actually specific issue that we can do focusing on that. And you rightly stated that, and this is the paradox. We used to do 130 metric tons in the 1980s. Currently, now we are doing about 40. This is notwithstanding the premium prices that our coffee is fetching internationally. But then also, adding to that is that, our coffee or the price of our coffee are subjected to this capricious movement of the international, global market. Unlike Ethiopia, where, they produce, they consume half of their coffee. So when the international forces are, jittery or volatile, they're able to cushion themselves because of this domestic, consumption. So it is very, very important as we discuss these issues. It's also to start cultivating culture of coffee consumption, domestically. I know Uganda is doing much, much better than us, but again, for me, this is some of the creative and innovative reforms we need to engage. You rightly said that we most likely must have a direct flight to the U.S. And the one, because the issue that I maybe have been thinking about, why can't Kenya Airways, or even some of these big hotel, be offering Kenyan coffee specifically? Yeah. One of the most glaring aspects about the coffee sector is the fact that if you go out on the street and talk to Mwananchi, the man on the street, about what exactly is a good cup of coffee, how they can tell the difference between a good cup from a not so good cup, the best quality of coffee, the knowledge is very little. There seems to be a gap in terms of creating knowledge about this sector and coffee consumption locally, that sort of thing. What are we doing about the aspect of knowledge creation, creating knowledge such that people can start to own the sector?
The information asymmetry that surrounds the coffee, and we saw it when we were doing the report, it is actually what has empowered all these different key players to take advantage. Because if you don't have, as we always say, information is power, and you don't have information, you're more likely to be manipulated. I have traveled, for the last 2 years, but Peter, I can tell you, it's been amazing, the demand of Kenyan coffee internationally. Yes. And everybody, whenever I go, is, Chairman, where's Kenya? You're not producing enough. And so the demand is there, and I'm assuming it is maybe these are comparative advantage that are attributable to God-given, location. In fact, I was in Seattle sometimes last month, and there was a study that was presented that granted these climatic changes that is happening, in the next 50 years, there will be no coffee in Latin America. The only where there will be coffee is in Kenya and Ethiopia. So with that kind of information, you know, again, will give us a comparative advantage that nobody can be able to take away from us.